Okay, well, good afternoon, and thank you for attending How to Help Survivors. I'm Jackie Meredith. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and sexual assault coordinator for the sexual assault program at Betty Griffin.
I'm Martha Cairo. I'm a registered mental health counselor intern, nationally certified, and I work as a counselor at the Betty Griffin Center, mostly working with women and children.
And so today we're highlighting Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we're going to talk about what sexual assault is, the statistics, and how to help survivors. So with that, isn't it? Okay, it's not moving. There we go. So what is sexual assault? So the Florida statutes state as the oral, anal, or vaginal penetration with a sexual organ or anal or vaginal penetration with any other object except as performed by bona fide medical purposes without consent. Consent is defined as intelligent, knowing, and voluntary consent and does not include coerced submission. And we're going to go in a little bit more about this in some slides down the road. So how does sexual assault affect us? Sexual assault affects over 6 million people in the state of Florida. In the US, every 98 seconds, a person experiences sexual assault. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped in their lifetime. More victims will be reporting because of the Me Too and Time's Up movement. Bisexual men and women are at a higher risk of sexual assault than heterosexual and homosexual men and women. So who can be a victim? Or who can be a perpetrator and who can be a victim? Well, anybody can be a perpetrator and anyone can be a victim. And I think perpetrators, they fall into that line where you look online and you see who's on the sex offender registry and you see this dark, shady man and who lives about a half a mile from your home. It can be really anybody. And now with social media and the news, we're seeing that. We're seeing that it can be doctors, such as the doctor who headed up the Olympics and at the University of Michigan. We're seeing that it could be a pop star like Michael Jackson. It can be a judge. It can be teachers. It can be anybody. And it's important to know that even if somebody's in good standing within the community, they can still have that dark side of being somebody who wants to be a deviant and perpetrate on a victim. A victim, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Jackie, I was going to add too, because there is the idea that the perpetrators are like stranger dangers and you have to watch out for them. So as a result, women and men let their guards down. But the facts are that 41% of perpetrators are acquaintances or intimate partners, and 13% of perpetrators are family members. And so, and the statistic of anywhere between 54 and 76% are known to their victims, either family members or friends or intimate partners. So only 13% of females are sexually assaulted by a stranger, and 15.1% of males are sexually assaulted by a stranger. So the fact that stranger danger, or people that we think, like you said, lurking in the shadows, those are not necessarily the people you have to be aware of what's happening. You have to be careful of your surroundings and who you're with. Doesn't matter who they are.
Okay. And it can be very subtle. Their grooming, and it can be very subtle to a very intense moment where you think, oh, the guy's just being, super nice to me. It's a neighbor. And then his touching gets a little bit more stronger. So, it's something to be aware of and to be mindful of. And I know there's people that we trust, like a grandparent or somebody, and you think, oh, that's a sweet little old lady or a little old man. And then you find out, oh my God, I didn't know they had that dark side. So it's really good to be mindful of your surroundings and the people, because you just don't know. And anyone can be a victim. And there are some populations that are more vulnerable, such as people who are mentally impaired, people who are mentally challenged, people who, aging in adult who suffer from Alzheimer's, dementia, people who are actually, they are infirmed, so they can't get out of bed, or a wheelchair, or people with severe disabilities, or pregnancy. A lot of times they make great victims because they cannot protect themselves. And a lot of times perpetrators will look for people who have great vulnerabilities, such as a bad family, such as um, their income is low. They look like they need help, like a mom needs help raising these kids. And that happens like a lot of times. Um, I think like if you ever watch the ID channel, um, sometimes, and it's hard for me to watch, and they do these shows about missing children, and they find out that it's a neighbor down the street that was friends with them, that gave them ice cream, that gave them popsicles. And nobody ever thought that that person would be like that. And he would, the kids would be outside playing, or they're always outside. So he would give them food. He would give them shelter if they needed it. He would be there to talk to them. And that's how he used his way to get in. Anything else, Marty, you want to?
No, I just think you mentioned that grooming process, and that's pretty subtle. It begins very innocently, and especially, I think single moms are particularly vulnerable to that because they are so overworked and overwhelmed so often. And so if someone comes along to help, and again, another issue that you touched on briefly is we think of it as only being males as being the perpetrators. Oftentimes, the perpetrator is a female as well. And so you have to be careful and just be aware of what they're doing, and being careful who you or your children are alone with, because children are vulnerable and are often victims as well. So it's not just adults that are sexually assaulted. And they can be, children can be sexually assaulted just by a variety of different people in their lives. So we have to just be careful, especially
Yeah.
but be aware of our surroundings. Yeah.
Right. Finding Neverland, that was on HBO, is a great, it's a great example of what grooming is. It really shows you how it's subtle and how it moves up. So if you're ever interested, I would really encourage you to watch that. That's a great documentary that shows about what it does to grooming, and how you don't really suspect it. You think, wow, what a great person. So, okay. So sexual assault is the most underreported crime in the United States. It's hard to believe, but it is.
Yeah, I have a number here that says only between 5 and 20% of sexual assaults are reported. So
Yep.
the numbers that we're giving you are only based on 5 to 20% of those who have actually been assaulted.
And that's because they're scared. They know their abuser. They're embarrassed. They're ashamed. They have fear of not being believed, reliving the trauma, being judged, victim blaming, fear what others may say, re-victimization, peer and family pressure, and being alone. And I'm going to go back to peer and family pressure because that's huge. A lot of families in their cultures, they don't want you to go outside. We'll take care of it within the family. And so, so when that happens, I'm so sorry. So when that happens, it's like the family feels like it would bring shame on the family if you talk to a police officer, if you talk to somebody else, or you seek help. That shows weakness. So a lot of times families will discourage somebody to come forward and report the assault. And plus they don't want anybody to retaliate against them as well. Sometimes they fear law enforcement. They don't want to report to law enforcement because they don't trust them. re-victimization is huge. A lot of times it takes up to 2 years to prosecute a sexual assault case. So with that being said, a lot of times the victim will have to keep repeating their story, and they go through different people. And finally, they may get up to the state attorney's office, and then they go, oh, you know what, we're not going to prosecute. Or they're going to plea out. And the person just feels like they're reliving it over and over. And so they just decide it's not worth it. A lot of times people are feeling judged, that they're being picked on because of what they're wearing. Maybe they were drinking, maybe they were using substances. That does not mean you gave consent. And that is part of it. If you cannot give consent, then that is considered rape. So that's something that people don't understand, that they feel like they have to be responsible. I was drinking, so I'm responsible for my rape. And it's like, no, the other person, it's their behavior. It's what they chose to do while you were unable to give consent, and they chose that behavior of raping you. The fear of not being believed. One of the greatest books that I have read is called A False Report. And I think if you YouTube it, or you go on, you can go, YouTube it, go online, ABC, NBC's Dateline did a story on it about False Report. It's about a girl who was raped. She reported it, but she didn't act like a real victim. And victims, there is really no way a victim should act, but according to police and family, there is a specific way that you should act in the story. And she didn't fit it. And so they branded her a liar, and they charged her for making a false report. So for 7 years, this girl who came forward, told her story, thought she was going to get justice, did not. For 7 years, this rapist was out there. He raped more women in different states. And they finally caught him, because it took 3 police agencies to come together. They caught him, and when they arrested him, they found evidence of this girl's rape. And they went back to the police and they said, we found everything that she said in this report. Her camera was missing, her driver's license. We found pictures of her tied up. And the girl did eventually sue the police department, but nothing happened to them. They weren't disciplined or anything, but they could have stopped the rape if they just started by believing and worked her case. Victims don't. Not a lot of victims will act. I know, like, if you watch Law and Order, you think, oh, wow, like that's how a victim is to act. But really, a victim will freeze. So more times or less, they will freeze instead of fight. I know in some cases, I've heard, why didn't you fight him off? Why didn't you run away? The body is in about preserving itself. So the body will literally freeze because it's scared that if they do act out, or they do, because the person's already in that position of power, they could do something even more terrible to them. They take their life. So in their head, that's what the body's doing. It's trying to save itself. And so a lot of times they freeze. So that is why you get people that are scared to come forward. Well, I just laid there. I didn't do anything. So I guess I asked for it. No, you didn't. So that has a lot to do with not reporting. And I think that's why we're trying to create awareness that these things happen and it's okay. And it does not mean you are responsible. Marty, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say one of the things that contributes to not being believed is when a victim has been sexually assaulted, that's considered trauma. And trauma when there's trauma to the body and the brain kind of, it jumbles all up. And so oftentimes when they're being interviewed, they're expected to, like, okay, tell me exactly what happened. And whoever's doing the interview oftentimes will think that, well, okay, you have to tell me exactly, like, from beginning to end. But in reality, their brain has been traumatized as well. And so someone gave the example, it's like having a file cabinet that's all nice and neat, in your brain. And when you're traumatized, it's like somebody takes that file cabinet and throws it upside down and scatters everything in every direction. And so they may remember part of what happened, but because of being in survival mode, they don't want to think of exactly what happened. And then days, sometimes weeks, sometimes even years later, people will remember facts about the event. And then they go back and try to tell somebody that. And then they're considered of making, like you said, making up a story. They're not telling the truth.
Yeah, that's a great point. Think about if you've ever had to make
But
a
it's not
911 call. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just like when you're very upset. If you've ever made a 911 call, you're in something bad, like somebody's having a heart attack or somebody's really sick, and you're trying to get the story out, but it's like you can't speak or you can't put your sentences together.
right,
That's because the body is overloading and getting ready to save because it knows something bad is happening,
right.
and it's trying to go into that survival mode. So that's why all that adrenaline, we call it the cocktail, is overloading the hippocampus, and the hippocampus has no timestamp. So it's got all these things that are in fragments that don't really fit together like a puzzle yet. And that's why when you try to tell, when they interview you right away, it's very difficult. And it's hard for you to say it, but in a couple days you may get pieces together. And that's when, you try to tell, well, no, I remember this is what happened, da, da, da. And that's where people get confused about trauma and about how people respond, because to them, it's like, it's not what we see on TV, right, Marty? It's not like,
It's not like it's not like it's resolved all within an hour.
yeah, exactly.
That's what
Exactly.
people think of. And so, and often victims are interviewed by several different people. So they may remember one thing while they're speaking with that person, and then something else comes to their mind where they're talking to that person, and then down the line. And so when these people that are doing the interviews come together, well, she said this. Well, no, well, she said this to me. And so then they decide that, okay, she's just not telling the truth. She's making this up. And oftentimes it's not true that she's making it up. She's just trying to recall and tell exactly what happened as it comes to her. So,
Mhm.
okay,
Yep. Okay.
right.
So here's the power and control wheel. And I'm going to go over this and I'm going to do a little examples. This is both used for domestic violence and for sexual assault because the two intersect. The two are very closely connected. So one of those things is using coercion and threats. And a lot of people ask me, well, what is coercion? And coercion is making threats or to do something to hurt you, threaten to leave you, maybe break up in the relationship, maybe to commit suicide, maybe report you to law enforcement, welfare. If you have children, making you drop charges if there's any charges out there, making you do illegal things because misery loves company. But coercion is usually used with intimidation, such as making and using like looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying your property, abusing pets, displaying weapons. But the two are usually together. And one example is that, say you're with your partner and you don't feel like having sex, but the other person's like, no, come on, I know you want it, come on, please, like, please, don't you love me? Why do you do this? Why do you do this all the time? I want sex and you can't give it to me. What is wrong with you? Then you don't love me, that you don't love me at all, and I'm just sick of it. I am sick of you treating me this way. And they reverse it on you, and they start using guilt and they coerce you into having sex with them. Does that mean you have said no? And so all of a sudden, even if you said, wouldn't matter. He had it in his eye. The way he was groping me and grabbing me more violently made me think, oh, well, you know what? It doesn't matter what I do. He's going to take it and he's going to sexually assault me. But you don't think of it as sexual assault. You just think, okay, well, I'm giving in. But that is not you giving in. That is still a violation of your personal space. It is a sexual assault violation when that person does that, because you are saying no, you are not giving consent. even though this person is using coercion, maybe threats and intimidation and emotional abuse to get you to do something that you don't want to do. So using emotional abuse is putting you down, making you feel bad about yourself, maybe calling you name, making you think you're crazy, playing mind games, humiliating you, making you feel guilty. Using isolation, keeping you away from your friends, your family, maybe your job, making sure that nobody can interfere with them, with what they want you to do. Minimizing, denying blame. I didn't rape you. I did not rape you. You wanted it. Yeah, no means yes, you wanted it. Um, don't even go there. Or using children. Um, Sometimes the abuser, they can't abuse the person themselves, will use their children. Or they'll keep the children from you or say they're going to steal them. Using male privilege, defining the lines of what a male and female should be, or the alpha partner is going to set the rules that they are in charge of the decisions, they're in charge of the money, they work, so you clean, you cook, and you do a side job, and all the money comes to them. Using economic abuse, keeping money from you, not letting you know what's in the bank accounts, only giving you a little bit, maybe keeping the car from you so you can't have a job. So, because if you had a job, then you could become independent and leave that person. So these are all things of power and control that the person uses to have over you. And it's something to kind of get to know and understand. So if you are on a date or you're dating somebody, to look out for these things. This is what we call red flags. Marty, do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, I often tell this to my uh, participants that I counsel with, pay attention to the red flags early on. And that's why this power and control wheel is so important, because it does tell you, and often when we show this to someone, they'll say, I had no idea. I had no idea. But yes, this, and this, and this is what's going on in my life. And so I try to tell them, when you're seeing someone or when you're dating someone, pick a little fight at the beginning and see what the response is. And if there's a huge negative response, then just back away from that person. Because when there's red flags in the beginning of a relationship, the red flags are not going to go away. They're going to get bigger. And so pay attention to those little warning signs early on in the relationship in order to avoid being just totally involved in all of these power and control methods that they use.
Yeah, and they escalate. They escalate, and then you'll have the moment, and then you'll have a moment of bliss in love, and that's the person who you fell in love with, and then it'll go back again till it'll escalate up. A great movie to watch is Sleeping with the Enemy. Is a great movie. It really shows about a woman of domestic violence and sexual violence and how she had to endure that and how she got away. Another thing too is a lot of people think that domestic violence has to be physical. It does not have to be physical to be that, oh, I'm not physically abused, so I don't even qualify for your services. Well, you know what, when we go over this wheel, a lot of people go, oh my gosh, just like Marty said, I didn't know. And I didn't know that was abuse.
And often it's if not all, close to all of those events that are happening in the relationship.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is domestic violence.
All right. So how has COVID impacted sexual assault? Well, nationwide domestic violence and dating violence has increased. An increase in those calling hotlines seeking counseling and injunctions for protection. Decrease in a number of sexual assault reports both on campus and nationwide. 60% decrease in reports of sexual assault, according to St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, and a decrease in number of people using the rape care unit. And I can respond to the bottom two because some people are scared because of COVID, because of the isolation, the quarantining, and then they didn't know because our rape care unit is located inside the hospital, which we manage. It has really, it's a standalone. It has nothing to do with the hospital, but we have space there that we use. And so people were scared. They didn't know. that they could go into the emergency room and say, hey, I was sexually assaulted during COVID. So a lot of people kept it to themselves, or they may have reported it online and got a little scared. Oh, I've got to go to the hospital. So it was kind of like, I'm not going to report. No, I'll just talk to a counselor. Things like that. So it was a big change in how what happened with sexual assault over the past year. We did have an increase in domestic violence, and I'm sure that's because of the quarantining, everybody's staying in, you're alone with your abuser. People were calling because they didn't know what to do. They couldn't get away. Shelters were overflowing with people trying to flee domestic violence situations. More people were seeking counseling and injunctions for protection against their abuser because they felt unsafe. Did you want to say anything, Marty?
No, it just has definitely increased, and even among children, and not just domestic violence, but also the issue of sexual assault among children has increased in the last year. Sure.
Yeah, that's sad. So Marty, take it away.
Okay, so how do we help when someone comes to us or someone says, I've been assaulted, I've been sexually assaulted? Well, first of all, you validate and you listen and you hear what they have to say, because it is, and it may be difficult to hear, but it's important that that person is validated. You offer empathy and understanding. You start by believing. You can use such statements as, I believe you, you're not alone. You can say, we can get help, help is available. And also include the statement, it's really brave of you. It took a lot of courage for you to tell me this. And ask yourself, if when someone's talking to you, if this were me, how would I want to be treated? Would you want it to be just like, oh, don't talk to me about that, I don't want to hear it? Or think about if that was you that was assaulted, what would you want to hear from the other person? In what way would I want to be helped if I disclose my secret? Who could I go to? How can I get the help I want? And that's why Betty Griffin is such an important organization, because when someone calls the hotline or when someone comes to the office, we try very hard to say, we believe you, we want to help you. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what can be done. So it's important to especially show respect, show that you care, and show that you want to be there with them through the process of getting help. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's a definition, there's coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms are strategies that people often use in the face of stress and trauma to help manage painful or difficult emotions. And when or how are these coping mechanisms used? They help people adjust to stressful events while helping them maintain their emotional well-being. And one of the things I do as a counselor, we actually have a list of 83 different coping mechanisms to try to help people, because what works for one person might not necessarily work for another person. And so I often give this list to people to choose some things off of that list to see what works for them. The number one thing is to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Crying is often let those feelings vent out. Let that just flow from you, so you can release some of that emotion. And honesty be honest with what you're telling the person. And when you're going for help, be honest with what has happened, because often people try to just hide, and they'll talk about the weather, they'll talk about their cat or their dog, but they kind of go around the issue of what they're really there for help for. And so it's important to be able to express and be honest with what has happened. Another coping skill is to take care of your body, exercise, get some healthy food, and rest. And it sounds like those are just the basics, but when someone has been sexually assaulted, they do not do that. They do not take care of themselves. They're so overwhelmed with what happened that they cannot think about taking care of themselves and resting and eating proper food. Make sure you have compassion for yourself. If you've been sexually assaulted, if you're someone that's been sexually assaulted, don't go down that route of it's all your fault. If only I had done this, or if I hadn't done that, or if I had said this or hadn't said that, that wouldn't have happened. But use that self-compassion, and I think Jackie touched on that a little while ago, that it's not your fault, okay? You can't take the blame for what happened. When you're sexually assaulted, that's not your fault. And if something doesn't work as far as helping you cope with what's going on and with moving forward with your life, try something else, try something different. Don't try the same thing over and over if it's not working for you. Create a new story in your life. Okay, this is big because this happened to you, but I often say, don't let that define you as a person. That happened. You can write that story and tell that story, and yes, that happened. But now let's work on writing a new story. Let's go from here, where you're at right now, and let's write a new story and move forward with your life and help it to one step at a time. Let's create something new and a better life for you, that you don't have to have that as your definition of who you are. Listen to your needs. If you need to lay down and take a nap, lay down and take a nap. If you need to eat a chocolate sundae to help you feel better, eat a chocolate sundae. If you need to go for a walk to just get out and exercise, go for a walk. Think about what you need, not what everybody else is telling you need, because not everybody knows what you need. Focus on the now. It's not, okay, yesterday is gone. You can't change the past. That has happened and you can't change that. But what's happening right now? Let's focus on right now. Learn from your experience. Notice when somebody's telling you, notice the source. If somebody's telling you, oh, don't worry about it, you know, that happened that one time, but let's go over here to this club, or let's go to this party. Don't worry about it. But pay attention to that, because if that's going to put you in a vulnerable position, just say no. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Notice what you can control. Sometimes you can control those emotions. Sometimes you cannot control, but you can control where you go, who you're with, the things that you do. A lot of things you do have some control over. Get others to support your recovery, because when we tell somebody else that I need to get well and get over this, they're going to come alongside of you. If they don't go back to that person and expect them to help you, but find those people that you can form that support group with, friends and family members, and even professionals, counselors and doctors that can help you to form your support group to help you get better and recuperate from this, because it is possible to recuperate and to recover from a sexual assault. So those are just a few of the coping mechanisms that you can use. And like I said, I'm not going to go through all 83 of them, but if anybody wants a copy of them, we can definitely provide that. You can put it in the chat box and we'll provide that list. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's another skill that's involved, and notice it's called coping skills and grounding skills. A lot of these things don't come naturally. So it's a skill that you learn. When you're young, you learn to write your name. Okay, when you're a baby, you learn how to walk. Those are skills. Well, these are skills that you learn that aren't often part of what we know to do. So we do spend time teaching people how to use some of these grounding and coping skills. Grounding skills are a little bit different because it's a technique that helps keep someone in the present right now. They help reorient you to the here and now and in reality. And when and how is it used? Grounding skills are helpful in managing feelings of being overwhelmed and intense anxiety. They help someone to regain their mental focus from an often intensely, and I would say unexpected, emotional state. Because sometimes when you've been sexually assaulted, there can be a smell, there can be a sound, there can be a person, that can all of a sudden send you into a panic, and you can have a panic attack just by something that you hear or smell or see, or you can become overwhelmed and cry and just become, some people say they just shake uncontrollably. And so when that happens, some of these grounding skills are useful to help control and bring you back to the here and now when you're in a safe situation, um, or to get you into feeling that you're in a safe situation. Grounding can happen anywhere, anytime, any place. You don't have to go to an office. If you're in a restaurant and somebody walks by and they have the perfume on that smells something like the person that sexually assaulted you, you can stop for just a minute and say, okay, I'm here right now. This is called, there's mental, physical, and soothing grounding. There's other types of grounding skills. I'm just going to mention a few. The mental grounding. If you're in a restaurant and that somebody happens to walk by that reminds you of the person that sexually assaulted you, you can sit right there in that chair and say, okay, I'm right here in this chair, in this restaurant. I'm safe. Okay, I can, let me see how many items are on the menu. Let me see if I can remember how many items are on the menu where I'm at in this restaurant. And it takes your mind and it takes it off of the situation. It takes it off of the sexual assault and it puts it into some just everyday, ordinary items. Bring your mind back under control, to bring your thought process back under control. You can name types of dogs while you're sitting in your chair. Okay, what are your favorite types of dogs? You can switch over to that because that brings you into something that makes you feel better. If these are the kind of dogs that you like, or perhaps the kind of food that you like, or perhaps the kind of flowers that you like. And you can just say them in your mind. You don't have to say them out loud. If you want to, you can say them out loud. And if somebody asks what you're doing, just say, I'm just getting myself together here. Physically, you can do some physical items in grounding skills. You can excuse yourself and go to the restroom, rinse some cold water on your hands and even on your face if you have to. If you don't want to get up anywhere and you feel frozen, you can plant your feet on the ground. And again, grab that chair that you're sitting in and just squeeze it as hard as you can and know that you're safe in that chair with your feet planted on the ground and you're okay. And another thing you can do is breathe. Often when we get that panic attack, we get that feeling like it's coming on, you forget to breathe. And so it's important to, if you're sitting in that chair and grabbing it with your feet planted, you can inhale just as hard as you can and exhale. And that helps to bring you're going to be focusing on those items rather than what sent you into a panic. So those are just a few of the skills that you can use.
Okay. So real quick, I'm going to show a breathing activity. So you can sit back and sit comfortably. You can close your eyes if you want to. But one thing we do is breathe through your nose for 4. Hold, then you count when you're breathing it in, 1, 2, 3, 4. You exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you hold, and you, before you breathe again for 4 seconds, and you do it again. The reason why you do this is because shallow breathing that we do a lot causes the brain to think that we are in trauma. So giving yourself a big, deep inhale and exhale is very good for the body for relaxing. So I'm going to go into the relaxation exercise since we're short on time. This one that you can do using your muscles, and what you do is you start at your toes and you squeeze your toes while you're breathing. You do your deep breathing and you squeeze your toes first and you hold it for 5 seconds and release. And then you do your calves and then your thighs, and you move all the way up until like your neck and that. And you make sure that you have good tension. And when you release, it releases these kind of like I don't want to say endorphins, but it's the muscles relax, and it kind of takes you to a different level where it takes all that stress and kind of melts it away. This is a great thing to use to help you fall asleep. If you're feeling really stressed, or in the morning you want to feel more calm, doing a deep breathing exercise and doing this exercise really helps out a lot. I use this a lot with children and some adults who are anxious, and it takes them from like an 8 down to a 2. Okay, so the healing process. So just let to be known that the process of making or becoming or becoming sound and healthy again. That's what the healing process is. So when and how to heal, there's no time limit on healing. We do it at our own pace. The process may take longer for some, but that's okay. We have to do what's right for us, and we may lower. One thing about sexual assault victims is that sometimes they don't reach out for help right away. We do follow up, but sometimes it may be months, maybe a year, maybe years before they contact us and say, I'm ready to heal. I'm in that place where I can really focus to do that. So what does it look like? I think Marty touched upon that, about having positive self-care, feeling better physically, mentally, emotionally, fostering resilience, living longer, better equipped to manage. When we do relaxation exercises and grounding, we take our brain waves from where they're way up high to low, and that enables us to make better decisions. It enables us to respond better instead of reacting. So having for healing and having a healthy lifestyle really can help your life be better. And when traumatic situations happen, it can also help you heal faster through that. So what services do we have at Betty Griffin? We have a 24-hour helpline. That's 904-824-1555. It's open 24/7, and it's manned by our trained advocates in sexual assault and domestic violence. It can help survivors, their families, and friends. We have a safe and secure shelter. It's our confidential shelter. It's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for both domestic and sexual abuse survivors and their children. We provide a safe and supportive service, sexual assault recovery services. I mentioned that we have a rape care unit. We have advocacy that can be there with you when law enforcement interviews you. We have SANES that work for us, the nurses that do the forensic exam. We offer confidential counseling, and any other services that you may need if you needed case management. Oh, and I mentioned we have the rape care unit. So confidential counseling, that can go to survivors and also people who are in the family of that survivor, or friends who are traumatized from it and want to talk to somebody that's of domestic and sexual abuse. We have Peace Club that teaches children ages 3 to 17 to identify abuse, build self-esteem, resolve conflicts peacefully, and develop a safety plan. We have transitional housing, which is empowerment based. And that is if somebody is living in shelter and they need transitional housing to help them become self-sufficient. We also offer support groups. We have 2 support groups. One is specifically domestic violence, and the ones I do is sexual assault and domestic violence. We have court advocacy. We have advocates that can go to court with you, that can be there with you while you're in court. They can also help you with injunctions. They can also go with you with law enforcement if you have to do some interviews, or at the state attorney's office. We have people that go out in the community like Martha and I that teach education about sexual assault and domestic violence. We have thrift stores. These thrift stores are on the island and on State Road 13 up in I think it's off of Racetrack and State Road 13. These thrift stores provide money for to enhance our services. So when you buy from our thrift stores or give, you are actually helping our shelter, our outreach programs, a lot of our services. So they really help fund us. So we thank you for that. Legal assistance, we have a legal department, that can help with, oh my goodness, I can't get it down. That are made by case basis for legal presentation through the injunction process, and can also give you referrals if you're interested in divorce. It's a case basis. And so there is where our outreach office is located at 2450 Omotu Road. The counseling center is in Suite A. They are in Suite 202. And our outreach number is 904-808-8544. And our hotline number is 824-1555. You can check us out on the web at www.bettygriffincenter.org. So if you have any questions, please feel free to bring it on. We love questions.